I'm Lawrence Francis, host of Interpreting Wine, welcoming you to the Willamette Valley Winemaker special series. Across these 6 episodes recorded in December 2022, we'll be exploring the modern Willamette Valley winemaker scene in the company of 6 producers, with guests chosen to reflect a range of locations, production scales, and philosophies. Undoubtedly the most up-to-date exploration of Willamette Valley winemaking available anywhere in podcast format. Subscribe to Interpreting Wine to be alerted when new series episodes go live. We continue the series today in the company of Brianne Day of Day Wines. Brianne shares with us her origin story. Before talking people and winemaking, we discuss her deep connection with Oregon growing sites and her choice of grape varieties. Before discussing export and domestic markets, business flexibility and adaptations since 2020, getting new people into wine, and observations on the current state of wine media. Enjoy.
Hi, I'm Brianne Day, Day Wines. I started the brand in 2012, but that was after years of being involved in the industry in multiple different facets. Today is about my 25th year of being involved with wine. Not today, but now is about my 25th year of being involved in wine. And I realized this because I just got back 2 days ago from Italy. And the last 2 days that we were there, I decided to spend in Lake Como because it was close to the airport, and also because it was the first place in my life that I had a moment with wine, and it was a turning point for me. So when I was just about to turn 19, I was raised Jehovah's Witness, and I got invited to go preach to people in Italy, and I wanted to travel very, very, very badly, and my parents wanted me to be a really good little Jehovah's Witness girl. And so they sent me over to Italy with this group of people to preach. And while I was there, we were on a day trip in Italy, in Lake Como. And we went on this boat ride out to this town, Bellagio. And I went into this little cave, wine cellar shop. And this man introduced Italian wines to me and let me taste anything there. And it was just this moment of really connecting with the stories of who these individual people were in all these different places that felt this kind of expression of themselves through wine. And that's really what stuck with me. From there, I didn't know that I could be involved in wine. It stuck with me for a long time, though. And in my early 20s, I ended up traveling around the world for a couple of years to wine producing regions to figure out why I had this really magnetic connection to it. And through the course of that trip, learned about organic and biodynamic farming and about minimalist and natural winemaking, especially in France when I was there, and came home to Oregon at the beginning of 2008 and decided that I wanted to be a winemaker. So I ended up working internships for about 9 different wineries, trying to pick people that all were making wines in the kind of minimalist fashion and using organic and biodynamic farming. I also worked in New Zealand and Argentina and Burgundy, France, and started working in restaurants, managed wine programs, and sold barrels for French cooperage, and worked a little in distribution. I really tried to come at it from all kinds of angles. Then in 2012, that's when I bought my first ton of Pinot Noir and made my first wine, and it was well received, and I was able to get some good distribution through that. And while I was working at one of my restaurant jobs, I had written a business plan and a projected 10-year budget. And some folks who I was waiting on happened to see my big grapevine tattoo that I have on my arm and asked me about it and what why I had this, thing. And so I started telling them about this connection that I had to wine and where I wanted it to go. And basically I was pitching my business plan to them during their dinner. Yeah. And by the end of their dinner, they said, we want to be your backers. And that really was a point that projected the project in a much quicker way than I could have done without them. I mean, I still think I would have started a winery and I would have made it happen, but I was able to grow much more quickly with that kind of support. And so today, this last harvest, we made close to 20,000 cases of wine. I worked with 30 vineyards around Oregon, everywhere from the Columbia River Gorge to the Willamette Valley down to Southern Oregon, and worked with about 25 different grape varieties and made, I don't know how many wines I made because I blend things a lot, and I make a lot of styles that are wines that are real styly based at this point. So I don't know how many we made, but that's where we are now. And then I just after harvest went on this trip to decompress with my kid and went to Italy, and we're going around to Piedmont and Valdosta and Liguria and Tuscany and all over the place. And at the end went back to Lake Como because I wanted to see if I could find that little shop. And it was a crazy, crazy feeling to step off the dock and see the sign Bellagio and remember it from when I was 18 years old, 25 years ago. And I got really kind of overwhelmed with emotion. And I Google searched for wine shops in the town and found one and went in and described the place I was looking for because it was notable. It was it looked like a little stone cellar. It looked like a little cave. And the people who in the wine shop knew exactly what I was talking about. They're like, it's right over here. Just go down the street, take a left. And I walked in and asked the guys that were there. I was like, do you speak English? And they said, yeah. And I tried to start telling them about why I was there and what it meant to be. And I just started crying and then had to calm down. Okay, calm down. And they said, we get travelers around, people that come in here. The man who owned it at the time was a guy named Tony, and he really turned a lot of people on to Italian wines. And you're not the first person to come in here and have this experience of having a connection with this place because of Tony. And they were super cool about it. And I ended up making a nice connection with the kid that worked there, who was 25 years old. He was a baby when I had been there the previous time. So it was really cool. It was really a cool full circle moment to have, started there and then gone all around the world and had all these experiences. And just to come back, it was, I'm feeling pretty high on life right now because of it. It was really cool.
Yeah, I absolutely love it, and I think it's it's one of the amazing things just about people, really. We can have these we have these exchanges, we can have these conversations, and you just never know what kind of ripple effects that's going to have, do you? I mean, and I think it's it's so nice. I mean, I had something I had not had any thought about before, but I remember being told by a friend that through hearing one of the guests on the podcasts, they'd gone off and wanted to start making wine, and that they'd been through that conversation they'd been introduced to grower champagne and a very sort of specific school and had set out really to make that grower champagne in England and to have it poured at this specific restaurant. And it was, were able to share that experience with me of that kind of coming full circle. So yeah, I can totally relate to that. And, just, how sort of overwhelming that was for me getting told. I'm sure it'd be great for, the guys in the shop and Tony, maybe if he's listening in to kind of get to hear that story again.
Yeah, it was amazing. I mean, I think my experiences in wine, both through having first been introduced to it through a person and then having mentors along the way, both in terms of winemaking, but also in terms of people who have introduced me to styles and regions and people to work for. There was a gentleman that I worked for named Michael Alberti who I met pretty much every one of my mentors in Oregon through him. He had a retail shop, and now he's writing for the Wine Enthusiast, covering the Pacific Northwest, and he writes for the Oregonian now. But he was totally instrumental in introducing me to people in the industry, and my backers that I met through waiting on them. They've become like family to me and my son. And, my son calls them grandma and grandpa now. Like, they are our family. They are his grandparents. It's amazing. And, that's something that wine doesn't exist in a vacuum. Grapes don't spontaneously become wine on the vine. There is a human element that has to be involved with it. And I think, sometimes winemakers like to maybe over romanticize the process and make it like, oh, I don't do anything. I'm just, I'm the wine makes itself. And to some extent, that's true. You provide a really good, clean, sterile environment for grape juice. It's going to become nice. It'll become wine. It will. But I don't think that minimizing the reason why we make wine is for people. It's for, people to enjoy. It's because the creative process is really satisfying to those of us that work on wine. And that's been something that I think has become more and more important to me, is valuing the human element in it, both, in terms of staff and vineyard workers and everybody that touches it, and try to celebrate every part of the human element of it.
Yeah, incredible. And I was just thinking back actually to when we first met, and when I interviewed you over there at the winery. I think how I describe it was that I didn't really know what I was getting myself into in terms of your knowledge and your, I would just say, closeness to the state of Oregon. I would say that really blew me away, and while there are obviously lots of knowledgeable people there, and I'm sure lots of people that travel around, I just think that the way that you described it to me was just phenomenal, and it was just I say I was just sort of completely blown away by that familiarity, I would say, with those different vineyards and with different grape varieties, and felt like the full sort of gamut of what's on offer there. And while that initial I think big picture description is still there in your initial interview in episode 389, what I'm curious to do is to encourage people to obviously go back and listen to that one after they've heard this. But what is it nowadays that I guess kind of makes you excited about a new project, a new site or new fruit, and maybe the best way to talk about that would be to actually maybe update us on some new sites and some new growers, or something different that's changed since we met in 2020.
Sure. Well, when I first started the project, my goal was to, like many people's goals when they start making wine, that they want to make the wine that's about the place and the year, and have it be this really clear, time capsule of those things. And that's still definitely my goal. But what I started to do is, when I started looking around at different areas of Oregon, realizing that there was potential for so much more than just Pinot Noir, Pinot Gris, Chardonnay. Not that there's anything wrong with those. And the majority of my production is still Pinot Noir. I'm making 4,700 cases that I'm bottling in a couple of weeks here of Pinot Noir Rosé. And then I'm making another 4,000 cases of Willamette Valley Pinot Noirs and single vineyard Pinot Noirs. So I'm definitely not, poo-pooing Pinot. But it's been really interesting to find growers that planted things that were what they were interested in, and they wanted to see what that would do in their particular part of the state. And then sharing that curiosity with them to say, what is Vermentino from Southern Oregon? What does that look like? And not knowing. So the only way to find out is to buy a few tons of fruit. It's every year's a gamble. I feel like I am at like the roulette table every year, and I'm putting all my chips on the harvest. And I am. And it's scary, and I have high anxiety, particularly this time of year. But like, the only way you can find out what things are is to make it and try. So at this point, in addition to growers themselves that have been curious and wanted to see what certain grapes were like in Oregon, I've also been working with a couple of growers and asking them to plant specific things that I'm curious about. And it seems that that's going to be a trend in my winery that continues, because I'm starting to make more connections with people that have available land and that want me to plant stuff and see what it is. So, at this point, I'm working with the first Zabibo in Oregon that's planted down in Southern Oregon, the first Nero d'Avola. I'm very curious about Italian grape varieties in Oregon. That's one reason why I've been deep diving on travel in Italy. Vermentino does really, really well in Southern Oregon, it turns out. It has a lot of the characteristics that remind me of Liguria, which are my favorite Vermentinos in the world, the salty characteristics and the more minerality. For some reason, Southern Oregon also produces Vermentino like that. And so I've been very curious about other Ligurian grape varieties like Rossese being planted in Southern Oregon. And there is one winery down there that planted at Troon. They aren't producing fruit yet because they're too young. So they haven't made a wine from it yet, as far as I know. But I think it's super cool that they've done that. And if you haven't interviewed Nate Wall from Troon, you totally should, because he is he's an extremely knowledgeable person and very interesting to talk to. Anyhow, I got sidelines. So I guess how do I make new wines? I take a look at what's selling well within the wines that I'm currently making. And certain wines that I make sell out really, really fast and have done really well, like my white blend that's called Vendédes Blanc. I make a red blend called Vendédes Rouge. They sell out super fast. And then started thinking about, well, what else? If the market's thirsty for that, and I can only make so much of that based on my equipment and the fruit availability and whatever, what else can I make that the market might also be interested in, that also is interesting to me? And since I've traveled a lot and tasted wines on all kinds of continents, and then worked in restaurants and seen wine pairings and how they work in, an on-premise kind of setting, as I come across fruit, I've got these like sparks that go off, and I just think about, what if I did this? What if I did that? What if I blended this and that? What would that be like? And I don't know if you cook or bake much, but it's kind of a similar feeling to when you're cooking, when you're like, well, I've never made this thing before, but I've eaten it and I can taste, that it's got shallots and thyme and butter and whatever. And then you can just kind of make something that is delicious, and maybe it's not a replica of anything else that you've had. And I don't want them to be a replica of anything else, but they come about as this like a response to what I think the market will do well with, a response to my own curiosity about what those varieties are like in Oregon, and a desire to make something new that makes sense to me. An example of that is I started working with Gamay and Dolcetto both last year, and it made sense to me to blend the two of them. They both, to me, have similar personalities within the regions that they're from. Dolcetto being the, kind of underdog kid sister to to Nebbiolo and Gamay having the same function in Burgundy to Pinot Noir. And yet I find both of those wines to be very joyful and fun and just yummy. And so it made sense to me to blend the two of them together. And now I make a wine that's a blend of the two of them that is called Infinite Air Castles. And I love how it came out. But, I took 700 cases the first time. It's a gamble. 700 cases is a considerable gamble to be like, I'm going to just try this thing. But it works. And I don't know. That's what I'm doing.
I love it. And I think when we first spoke, I believe you were not yet in the UK, kind of exporting wines over there. Is that still the case? You still sort of looking and maybe
well,
just
I hit the pause button on exports because I wasn't making enough wine to satisfy my domestic distributors. And then when you export, you always lose a little bit of money because there's logistics that are involved, whether it's like, freight. I was exporting a bit to South Korea, and it was nice. It was wonderful that they wanted to work with the wines, and that makes me happy. But then you lose a little bit of money everywhere because you have to get the wines to the docks, or you have to pay for whatever, tariffs or whatnot. So it just made more sense from a business perspective to keep things on a domestic level. But I am interested particularly in having my wines in the UK. And I feel like at 20,000 cases that I'm making now, there's enough quantity that, it makes sense.
Yeah, sure. And I guess the flip side of that, and the other question that kind of comes to mind as well, and I think is absolutely relevant in terms of the time span in between our conversation, has actually been that domestic market there. I mean, have you noticed COVID and I guess the what I believe is known as channel shifting that took place in the States? Like, has that had a big impact on, well, I guess, where you're selling, who you're selling to, but then also a little bit of that, what you're making now to satisfy those people?
Yeah, for sure. The thing about what happened during COVID was initially our in-person direct sales dried up entirely, and restaurant sales dried up pretty considerably, obviously. But the retail sales took off because everybody still wanted to drink and everybody was at home. And then our direct sales rebounded really quickly after that, and we put a lot of effort into outreach and tried to build that part of our market through Zoom tastings and through building our wine club and making our wine club be compelling to people by through these different means. So our direct sales and our retail sales are the ones that have really come out in a really big way. And now restaurant sales are kind of rebounding, but depending on the city, restaurants are still playing catch up. I don't think that they're quite where they were pre-pandemic by any means. And I don't think that the sales are either. So I'm making, like I mentioned, I make a big chunk of Pinot Noir Rosé, and that's pretty much my entry level pricing on all my wines. And that is almost entirely for high-end grocery stores and bottle shops and case stacks, and it does really well in that setting. All of the more entry-level priced wines move much quicker than the higher priced wines, the single vineyard Pinots and whatnot. And the higher priced wines were kind of always more made for on premise, and that it makes sense. So we've definitely had to shift a bit.
Yeah, and it totally makes sense, and not to sort of put words in your mouth, but I guess that the the setup that you have, where you've got all of those different relationships. Fair enough. It may feel like roulette on one hand, but I guess also kind of keeping those relationships going, and maybe spinning different plates. I guess that gives you flexibility, to adapt to something as huge as COVID, which I guess is probably the ultimate stress test. Touch wood that there won't be as monumental a shift in terms of the market and the consumption and the price and what people are looking for in our lifetime. Certainly not for any
For
sort
sure.
of reason.
Yeah, my winery is set up in a way that's very, very flexible, and I'm happy with that. I mean, not owning vineyards myself is a number one reason why I can pivot really quickly from vintage to vintage, and that's a blessing. I mean, not owning vineyards is there's good things and bad things about any aspect of how wineries are set up, and I also, that means that a vineyard that I work with can be sold to somebody else, and I can lose that contract. Or a grower can decide to retire from grape growing. And these are things that happened within the last few months. That's why they're fresh in my mind. There's a lot of things, and maybe a wine I love to make is no longer available for me to make, and that's taken out of my hands. So there's the lack of control over your fruit sources, but also the ability to pivot and change and try new things for a year or two, and then decide maybe this doesn't work for me, and I don't have to keep doing it, and that's okay. And I like that freedom. It works well with my personality. So
and I got to say, as a customer as well as a punter, it was great to sit with you in the winery, and I kind of remember off mic. You were like, okay, let me go and grab this wine and let me try this wine. I think there was just that excitement of bringing something new with a different label. And I remember, you getting really excited about this, the Pinot that was a Momtazi sourced fruit and a Tannat, and it was really such a cool tasting experience from my point of view as well. And I think naturally I've kind of guided you into talking about the wider Oregon and that kind of quite unique relationship, I guess, that you have with the growers and the sites and that connection. But I think something else that really stood out for me as well was the winery itself, and kind of your philosophy around that in terms of as I picked it up as a sort of an education space and a place to bring through other winemakers and to share and to kind of build community. And I wonder, if you would just sort of maybe again sort of paint that very up to date picture for us in terms of what might have changed and what does it sort of look like in 2022, 2023.
Yeah, well, with the growth of the brand, it became necessary to stop renting out space to smaller producers. So the only other people that are making wine in the building right now are my assistant winemakers. And so they each have small projects that they're working on. And I like making that available to employees who have their own business ambitions and winemaking ambitions, to have some space available to them. And it helps because employee retention is really hard right now in the States. I don't know if it's the same in the UK, but having the ability to offer, space to up and coming winemakers as a part of their employment has been a nice bonus to be able to offer that. We kind of have a real purely custom crush kind of relationship with 3 different people also, like making wine for them. But I don't have any other, tenants that are tenant winemakers except for my 2 assistant winemakers.
Okay. And does that by that kind of change then, by that kind of evolution then, does that mean that your production has grown since 2020?
Oh yeah, considerably. 2020, it's probably doubled since 2020.
Wow. Uh-huh.
And we just built over this past summer, an outdoor production space. So a covered crush pad where I was able to move the presses outside and some fermentation tanks and do all of our sorting outside. And that opened up space inside for fermentation, which allowed us to grow a little bit more. I think 20,000 cases in our building right now is comfortable, and it's possible that we could grow, but I think I need this coming harvest to not grow, for me personally, for my nerves, because I just can't take any more. It's a lot to manage. And like you said, it's a lot of spinning plates. And I kind of keep things in my head a lot. And I mean, I make spreadsheets, but it's just a lot to manage with that many vineyards and types of wines and everything, that I think I just need to, but I also say this every year, that I need to not grow and I need to stop making new wines. And this is literally what I say in December every year following harvest. So I don't know. I don't know if I'm going to do it or not. I know what I need to do. I'm not saying I will.
I love it. And I think, and you said there in terms of, I guess the evolution of the space. I mean, I think it'd be great to get a feel for, the types of people who are coming to taste, and I guess are also then by extension also like committing to the wine club as well, because I think that one of the things that the numbers kind of don't lie, is that there is still, I think, a challenge of getting new people to come into wine. There's still a lot more people retiring, sunsetting, as I think they call it, and on the kind of on the younger end of things, there's, I think, way more competition now than there maybe ever has been. All of the different range of drinks. So yeah, I'm just curious, as somebody who I think is it will be close to that, in terms of direct to customer relationship, and as you say, reading the market and having to make decisions about where to buy fruit and maybe now more towards where to plant. What might be some of those types of conversations that you're having, or even just I guess desires that people are kind of expressing? What do they want when they come to a winery or buy your wines?
Well, it's been interesting to observe. When I started the brand, I remember always saying that I wanted to price the wines and make the wines that were approachable to my peers. And a lot of my close friends and my sister, they are not big wine nerds. They love wine. They love to hang out and have wine with dinner and, hang out at a party and drink wine and whatever. And so, yeah, I'm popular in my friend group when I bring cases of wine to the party. But that's who I wanted to make wine for, were people that I cared about, people in my peer group. And that's always been in the back of my mind, pricing it in a way that was approachable to people, that, it's still like a $25 bottle of wine. That might be an entry-level price in an Oregon winery. It's one of my entry-level priced wines. It's still not cheap for a lot of people. Even a lot of people that have, means don't think about spending more than $25 on a bottle of wine, because you can go to Trader Joe's and get a bottle for 10, or you can go to whatever, Costco, and get a bottle for 15, and it's still okay. I wanted to make wines that were not prohibitively priced to anybody. And it's been interesting to watch the wine club grow, and the people that gravitate towards my branding and towards what I'm making, because I think it's overwhelmingly my demographic. When my wine club shows up, it is majority female, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's guys there too. It's pretty cute because there's a lot of guys that you think probably they just based on looking at them, maybe hang out in brew pubs more than wineries, but they are part of my wine club. And I like that. But the majority of what I'm seeing are like 27 to 50-year-old women. And they're hanging out with their girlfriends and they like what I'm making and they like the branding. I think they like that it's not snooty. My staff is approachable and down to earth, but knowledgeable and fun. Fun is always a really big focus in all aspects of my business, both with, the branding, with the experience that we try to present to people when they come into the winery, and knowing that drinking a bottle of wine should be fun. It shouldn't be work and it shouldn't be like serious. You're like, this is eating and drinking. This is hedonism. And that's what I want it to be. And I guess that's what I project. And, so the whole like conversation that I keep reading about in, different publications about, what are we going to do when the boomers all stop buying wine and we're relying on the next big generation, which is the millennials? That really hasn't been an issue for me. Millennials have been kind of my bread and butter since I started it, and that seems to still be the case. And that's not to say there aren't boomers that are in my wine club, and they are. And, there are some, older folks that come in and have heard things about the wines and respond well to them. I loved when I first opened the tasting room, that we had a lot of people from the community come in, and I remember seeing these two older Yamhill County gentlemen drinking my Tears of Vulcan, my orange wine was one of my much more avant-garde kind of styles, and being like, this is good. I love it. I love when I see that. I love that response. But I do feel like there has to be whoever the person is, whatever their age or demographic in any way, that they have to be open and want to have a good time. Those are pretty much my criteria. So
I love it. And I think you're right. I think there's something about, I think you do, project openness and, honesty, I would say. But I can speak for myself. Even just, last week was, sitting with, again, people that they just like wine. They weren't necessarily wine nerds or wine geeks. No one has to be. And I think after a while they kind of felt, they saw I wasn't a complete kind of wine snob, and they kind of felt safe enough to ask me the questions like, does the punt under the bottle, is a really deep punt, is that a really good wine then? Is that good quality? Or the weight of the glass, and all the questions that people have about the screw top and the cork, and there are all these myths that I guess used to be part of the mystique of selling wine, of making it mysterious, and you're going to be sort of told what to buy and told what to like, and if you don't like it, then there's something wrong with you. And I just I love that story that you kind of painted there, and that picture you painted there, just in terms of why not pluck someone who's is drinking beer, and who's drinking craft beer, or is going to the farmer's market, or is just curious, and it's just open-minded. And I just think that as much as we can encourage that curiosity and not kind of put up that wall that I think historically we have in wine, then I think that's going to encourage people to, all right, I'm a cider drinker tonight. I want to try some Tears of Vulcan, or I want to try some. Okay, I like Pinot Noir, rosé. Just leaving that openness and modeling that openness, I think is huge, really.
Well, I don't know why. From my perspective, I don't know why any business would gatekeep who will want to drink their product, would want to drink their wine, or put up barriers to people. because the point of making all this wine, I can't drink it all. The point of it is that I need to sell it. So I might as well make it as appealing and approachable and, easy for as many people as possible to enjoy it.
Yeah.
I don't know. It doesn't jive with my way of thinking that I just wouldn't understand why you would make barriers to people.
Yeah, no, and I get that, and I think the listeners will totally get that. And just as we kind of lead towards closing, really, I do just want to offer you the chance to evolve, and kind of capture a bit. One of the thoughts that you shared with me kind of before we put the mic on was just your observations around wine media, and just the way that maybe wine is being spoken about, and I won't sort of steal your thunder, but I just encourage you to just share the thought as it's something that's front of mind, as we're sitting down here today.
Yeah, it's I'm curious about it. It's something that I've been observing lately because I've noticed a drastic change in it, and I'm interested to see what direction that goes. It feels like wine writing has gone through a lot of different, peaks and valleys and curves and all over the place. And it's a little bit quiet right now. And I've been interested to see what that means and where the interests are. It's just curious. Like, I feel like we went through, the main part of wine media being around like Robert Parker and Wine Advocate and Wine Spectator and Points. And there was a real push away from that. And then all this natural wine writing and media came out, and there was a lot of talk around that, a lot of buzz. And it feels like the progression as of late has been towards highlighting the stories of diversity within the industry. And I think that has been a gap in an omission in the industry for forever up until now. And it's great that that's the place that it's going. But overall, I'm noticing a lot less wine articles. And I used to check in on, Punch Drink and on Eater and all these little go-to things. And it feels like it's just quiet. So I'm curious about that to see what's next. What are we talking about next? Because there's always something else coming up. So yeah.
I know. I get that. I get what you're saying, and I imagine, or how that observation kind of lands with me is just that when you really start looking, you just realize how huge the world of wine is. I'll admit, I'm sort of only very much dipped my toe into Italy, just because I know how diverse just one region of that country can be, and just the different nuances and the different styles. And I think as you say, there's maybe something weird to say it, but there's maybe something that those two share, Parkerism and natural wine kind of share, just in terms of kind of clarity of communication. It's like 100 points. What could be clearer than that? The closer you get to 100 points, the better. That's got some advantages. To a lot of people, it's like, okay, I don't want to have to think, and study just to order a bottle of wine. All right, fine, 99 point wine. And then I think, potentially there's the other side of that, which, as you say, I think, did kind of grow out of that and kind of backlash, reaction, whatever people want to call it. But again, that then becomes quite simple, doesn't it? And this sort of unifying movement as well. It's like, okay, now we're going to go to something that hasn't been interfered with. It hasn't had too much additives. It hasn't had too much done to it. It's, it's organic. And, we in the meantime, we've all move to organic, or we at least know what organic is, and I think you're right. I think it's maybe it's keeping an eye out for what the next sort of message that kind of can cut through and can kind of maybe bring together into another movement. Maybe that's where we're at.
Yeah, I'd be curious to find out. I know what struck me as being interesting. It has been striking me as being interesting is, and I noticed this a lot on my trip in Italy. We're talking with younger people and finding out why they were interested in the wines. I noticed this came up several times for me. There was a young woman I was in Coconato in Piedmont, and she was running her family's wine bar, and the selections that they had there were not typical for a small wine bar in Piedmont. They were international. She had French wines and Spanish wine. I mean, mostly European. I don't know if I saw anything like American or Australian or anything like that, but it's unusual to see French wines when you're in Piedmont. So I started talking with her and asking her about, her choices. And she was like, well, we like to drink things that are outside of just the local wines. And then she went, I really wanted to find out what made her tick. And she went down on this really local pride thing around Barbera. And it was super cool to talk with her about that. There was a young man at that wine shop on Lake Como who, was introduced to wine like 3 or 4 years ago and was really passionate, again, with this local pride about it. And even sitting at the airport in Heathrow on the way home, I was sitting in a wine bar and I ended up chatting with this kid who was from South Africa sitting next to me. Didn't work in the industry, but to see like a guy, he looked 21 at the most, drinking wine and thinking about it. And then a German girl sitting next to him. I'm really curious about these really young people that are getting involved with wine and why, and what is it that's drawing them in. It's interesting to me. All my interns this year, all really young and really passionate. And I'm curious about this really young generation because there's a lot of passion and it's cool to see.
Absolutely love it. And I feel like I could talk all day. But I just want to leave or just say it was, wonderful talking again and reconnecting. Hope we can reconnect in person at some point in the future because, as I say, would love to be able to try some more of your wines again and try some of these new varieties and hopefully taste some of the vineyards that you're planting. But in the meantime, for me and for the listeners, please just let us know where's the best place online for us to follow along with you, website, main social media, etc.
Our website's www.daywines.com, and that's where you can buy wine in our online store. I'm on Instagram at Brianne Day is mine, and it's a private account, but you're welcome to follow me, and I'll accept. And then we also have our winery account, which is Day Wines, and my direct sales manager Layla runs that and does a great job with it also. So those are probably going to be your best bets. I don't tweet, I don't TikTok, I don't Facebook, I can't handle anything else. So really it's just like Instagram. So yeah.
A massive thanks to today's guest, Brianne Day of Day Wines. Please do help to amplify this amazing episode and the series by sharing the direct link, which is interpretingwine.com/529. You can also find all 6 episode links from the series in the description below. And of course, I'd love to have you following along with me on social media, where I'm at Interpreting Wine on Instagram and Facebook, and at Wine Podcast on Twitter. Next time on Interpreting Wine's Oregon Winemaker series in episode 530, I'll be speaking with Doug Turnell of Brickhouse Vineyards. Make sure you're subscribed to be alerted when the episode goes live. See you then.